Alright, so I'm not gonna lie, I got no idea what I'm gonna talk about or what this video is even gonna be about mainly, but I kinda wanna do two things because they're very connected, and it's on one side to rant about the IDV community and how IDV players tend to behave, and on the other just rant about the Gravekeeper buff. So, as I mentioned the Gravekeeper buff, probably two things happen in your mind. Either you say, oh yeah, the buff I like, or oh yeah, the buff I dislike. Or you can be, I guess, like, not have an opinion, but most people I think are going to be opinionated on this sort of thing, so let's just assume you have an opinion, and I kind of want to crush it for a little bit. Why do I say this? Well, let's dive into one of the things I hate the most about the NNFF community is when it comes to gameplay and balance and how obsessed the IDV community is with balance and buffs and nerfs and buffs and nerfs and oh, this character needs a buff, this character needs a nerf. And I'd love to say it's not a bad thing to think about those things. Like, I think every player when they play a game, like, they like to think, oh, I wish the game was like this, I wish the game was like that, and that's perfectly fine. Like, everybody does it, I'm pretty sure, and it's really not a bad thing to wish the game to be better. And when a game does a lot of balance changes, I think it's a really good thing. But let's make one thing clear: balance is not everything when it comes to gameplay, and that is the main thing I want to rant about. Is that people only care about one single thing, and it's balance. Am I winning enough? Am I losing too much? Do I feel like this is broken? Whatever. There's other things to consider when you want to talk about gameplay and designing gameplay and how you want to change abilities and stuff like that. I am talking about game health, and maybe some people know what game health is. I'm not sure how to define it, but to me, when a game is healthy, it's when you make sure that, well, especially in a multiplayer game, you have different like players who each have their own set of abilities, and they have a set of choices of different things they can do, like abilities to master, or different choices to make. And each player will have things they can do to like play, and then there's counterplay. And if the gameplay is healthy, there's gonna be certain things you can do, and then you can counter those things. And overall, the point of healthy gameplay is that both players are going to have a chance to win, well, if it is a winning type of encounter. But if both players like have a shot at winning and losing in a way that is fair, and that ultimately rewards the player that made the better play, then I think that's what we could consider healthy gameplay. So yeah, I guess that's how I would define healthy gameplay, just making sure that good players are rewarded for being good players, and that being bad players, like, you cannot get punished for it, and that way you can have like fair gameplay. So when it comes to IDV, I think we know that in terms of health wise, we're already in a very bad start. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because when it comes to an asymmetrical game, having healthy gameplay seems almost impossible, I'm not gonna lie. But we can still try to make sure it is healthy, at least a little bit. Even in symmetrical games, like, the perfect healthy gameplay doesn't exist. It's more like an objective, like a imaginary objective, because unless the game is perfectly symmetrical, as long as you have like different characters and stuff, it's never gonna be fully healthy. But it's not a problem. Like, as long as most of the gameplay feels fair, then yeah, the game is usually in a good spot in terms of game health. Now, I could rant for hours on how IDV is completely unhealthy in terms of so many different stuff, but that's for another video. But the whole point I was trying to make is that game health is really important to make a very enjoyable gameplay experience. If the gameplay isn't enjoyable, if it doesn't feel fair, then it's kind of a problem, and the game becomes a lot less fun. But the problem is, IDV players don't seem to care at all about it. They only care about winning and losing, as I said before, and I think that is a huge problem because they will completely disregard any like red flags and things that are absolutely horrible for the game in terms of fairness and health, and they will straight up like ignore that and just care about, okay, can I win more or can I lose more? And I think it wouldn't matter to them if the game was like terribly boring with completely broken mechanics left and right. And as long as they get to win at the end of the day, then I think that's how IDV players, most of them, would go about with their day. And it's a bit sad to me because personally I've reached a point in the game where like winning or losing, I tend to try to ignore it. But like it's not my main focus when I play the game. My main focus is to have fun with my characters, try different strategies, and try to get better at the game, even though I'm not always the best player in the game. I just want to have fun in the game. So yeah, that was my mini, very disorganized rant on game health and how I really wish the community would give a shit, but oh well. So how does I tie in with the second main subject, Gravekeeper buff? Well, as I said before, when I mentioned the Gravekeeper buff, you probably thought, whoa, he needed it, or he did not need it. And when you said that, you probably think about balance, like, do you think Grave is strong or do you think he's weak? And the problem is, like, I could argue on balance, but chances are I'm not going to change your opinion because that's just how humans are. It's very hard to change other humans' opinion, and the video would probably be useless. So rather than base my analysis on something subjective as balance that not everybody agrees on, I'm going to focus on the game health part of the thing, and that way I can be probably a little more objective and have a very concrete analysis. So yeah, I guess the main purpose here is to analyze the balance change without even like giving a shit about balance, because I'm kind of trying to prove a point regarding how you want to make the game and how you kind of have to stop looking at balance for a minute sometimes and just say, okay, is this really good for the game? So let's go on. So if we look at the change itself, you have to understand why they made it. So they did have a reasoning which they explain, and that is that they don't like the interaction where the hunter chases the Gravekeeper, and that also applies to First Officer, by the way, but his buff was a little less stupid and like gameplay, like in terms of gameplay the buff wasn't that bad. I still don't really like First Officer's buff, but I really want to focus on Gravekeeper because I just want to use it to demonstrate some stuff. So yeah, they want to eliminate the interaction where the hunter would chase the Gravekeeper and then leave, making him waste an item. So why is that absolutely horrible of a change? Completely ignoring balance. Well, let's think of the interaction right there. So the hunter is probably in the early game. The hunter spawns, they're looking for a first target, and what do they find? A Gravekeeper. So there's an interaction. You have two players facing each other, and everyone is gonna have a decision to make. So the hunter has multiple things he can do. He can just say, oh, I don't want to waste my time on this Gravekeeper, I just want to get into my first chase immediately. That way, hopefully the Cypher Rush isn't too bad, and that's one of the choices he can have. Or he can say, well, I want to get a bit greedy, maybe chase this Gravekeeper, and either I can get a lucky hit on him, or make him use some good pallets, or make him use an item, and then leave him. And maybe like there will be a positive return for me. And now let's look at the Gravekeeper's side. So he also has multiple choices. So first off, he's running away from the hunter because that's what you do. But then it's like, okay, so do I think he's gonna commit to me? Do I make sure I'm in a safe area? Do I use my item immediately because I don't want to take the risk of taking a hit because I'm a rescuer, and if I'm a rescuer and I take a hit, it is a really, really bad thing for the team, especially if you're the only rescuer. But my shovels are precious. I have a decoding debuff, so I have to make sure my item has an impact on the match. So using a shovel could be also detrimental. So do I get a bit greedy and try to kite him? Or kite her, sorry. So kite the hunter without using any item, which is not the easiest thing to do and is definitely a bit risky, which also will depend on which hunter it is, because each has their own early game and stuff. So, point is, there's a ton of things to consider and decisions to make, and that is what I would call a healthy interaction, because both players have things they can choose to do, and depending on what they do, either they'll go for the safe options and be safe, but both players can choose to be greedy and try to get rewarded for that, and if they play well, they will get rewarded. Like the hunter could get some resources out or the health state from the gravekeeper, and the gravekeeper, if he plays well, can save his shovels. So that is a good, healthy interaction where both players will do stuff and they will get rewarded or punished depending on what they do, and if they do the right decision, and if they act out on the stuff they want to do with good skill. So great, we have a healthy interaction in Identity 5. Woohoo, we should celebrate, right? Wait, what? The developers want to remove it? Oh, okay. Well, let's look at what happens now after the buff. So the hunter comes near the gravekeeper, and I think the hunter has kind of the same choices, either chase the gravekeeper or go away, but I think one option is going to become very clear, especially when it comes to gravekeepers, kind of choices. Well, what choice do you have? Well, pretty much only one. Dig, and just dig, because if the hunter chases you, you'll be safe and you won't lose a health state. If the hunter leaves, you'll just get your shovel back. You don't get punished for using an item. You don't even need to use your brain and think about it. Just dig. And that is how you successfully ruin a healthy interaction. So, as you can see, I have successfully criticized the change without even one time talking about balance. It was all about gameplay health and interesting gameplay. And I think we can objectively say that the change is bad. And I didn't even mention balance because balance is so subjective and not everybody's gonna agree. But if you look at this angle, then it doesn't matter if Gravekeeper is the best character in the game or the worst character in the game. It doesn't matter if he desperately needs a buff. I would heavily still criticize this change because in terms of gameplay, in terms of health, it's just not good for the game, and the game is becoming progressively more boring and boring with all these changes that are happening. And on a side note, even if you wanted to talk about balance, then this interaction was, I would say, already on the side of the survivor, because no matter what happens, if you find a rescuer first as the hunter, it's not a good start. Even if you get a hit on them, having to change target and walk across the map and spending all that time to hit the grave and stuff like that, you waste a whole bunch of time, because in the meanwhile you have 3 people who are hammering down ciphers and it's overall not well. So I really don't know why the devs made this change. I really don't know. If anybody has a different explanation and different point of view on this change, I would gladly like to know about it. But this is my analysis, and I don't really see any other way to justify this change. So in the end, what am I trying to say? Am I overanalyzing a small buff just so I can be petty or whatever? No. It's more to prove a point, because it's really not the first time that this happens. We've had a lot of changes that have kind of dumbed down the game. I don't know if I pronounced that right. But It's been happening progressively with every balance change. Well, I wouldn't say like all balance changes that does make it bad, but it's kind of a recurrent thing to have characters made just easier and more brain dead, and like having their complexity removed just because their their complexity would hurt their popularity and or viability. And it kind of sucks because now we have, especially for Survivor, a meta that's built around like how brain dead can you be so you can be the most consistent as possible. And in a meta where consistency is valued, then like characters that require like more risk taking but would have higher reward just don't have a spot, because if you present any risk, then you're not viable. But to me, risky characters where you have like risk versus reward and it's all proportionate, to me that's the pinnacle of healthy gameplay, and the devs just don't seem to want that, like especially for Survivor. A lot of hunters do have very healthy gameplay, but they tend to be like pretty mediocre hunters, because for a hunter to be good they have to fight the unhealthy Survivor meta. And that's really unfortunate because I really like this game, but when it comes to gameplay and how interesting it is, it's really not going in a good direction. And to close off this video, I just want to say that perhaps I could say I feel bad for hunters, but I don't really. The people I feel bad the most when it comes to this situation is actually Survivor mains, the good ones, because people who play Survivor and have skill, it's becoming harder and harder for them to show off their skill. Like like player skill is becoming so unnoticeable because bad players are just getting stuff handed out to them. So when good players do the same thing because they are good players, it's just not impressive, because bad players can do the exact same thing because there's just the healthy gameplay with risk and reward, it's just not there. Man, I hope this video wasn't too long, but it probably is, because that's always how it ends up. I just talk too much, so sorry about that, but if you reach the end, I appreciate it. And yeah, that's about it, so hope you liked the video. Bye.